DC the boys, Alabama Prisoner Profiles. What's going on, man? Make sure y'all like, sub, share the video, comment on the video, donate to the channel's Cash App and PayPal in the description if you're feeling generous, man. Shout out our sponsor, PAX Los Angeles. Make sure y'all visit their online store linked in the description for the gas, edibles, vapes, merch, etc., man. Shout out all my subs, man. I hope you guys had a happy holiday with your families and shit. And thank everybody that hit me up to wish me and my family a Merry Christmas, man. Also, these folks got me an Xbox Series X among other shit, man. Complete surprise, because I told these folks not to get me nothing because I'm trying to, get the finances right for the little girl on the way and shit. And these folks still done hooked me up, man. So if you play Xbox and trying to game with DC, drop your gamer tag in the comment section or hit me up in the DM on Facebook or Instagram and we'll get to it, man. So today we're going to be getting back into part 3 of former Warden Oscar Dee's story. And today he's going to be talking about, surprisingly, more discipline and running the electric chair. Let's hop right into that right now. Well, I don't think they took it that I was a bully or anything like that. They just took it I meant what I said. If I told a prisoner, you're going to do this, and it was wrong, I'd tell the boss, I'd say, that prisoner done what I told him to do. If you got anything to say about it, you get on my ass. He done what I told him to do. Well, they knew I'd do that, see? So they didn't mind doing what I said to do, because they knew I'd back them up. So I never did have no trouble out of no prisoners. Only one prisoner I had threaten my life. I had one that called the prison one time and tell the warden that he was going to kill me. So the warden called me in there and told me. And I told him, well, if he was going to kill me, he never would have called you and told you he was going to kill me. I said, he just killed me and that'd been it. The warden asked me, goodness. Warden asked me, don't it bother you? I said, no, it don't bother me. Just like I say, if he was going to kill me, he would make sure he told nobody nothing about it. I never did see that prisoner at all after that phone call. On the other hand, there's a whole lot that comes to see me. Simpson was a bookkeeper of mine at Katona, and his wife lived in Georgia while he was in the penitentiary. And I don't think he had but 5 years, I believe, for forgery. He developed some heart issues, and he had home a rifle and a fish and tackle box. I love the fish and hunt stuff like that. And he made a request through his wife and his daughter, if anything happened to him, he wanted me to have his rifle and his fish and tackle box. He requested them to give them to me when he died, and they did. He died at my prison at Katona. He was a good prisoner. I never seen a prisoner yet that's been in my prison that wasn't glad to see me. They come all the way across the street to shake hands with me. I never acted like they resented me at all. And I reckon I punished more prisoners than anybody in the state. It's like I said before, I tried my best to do right. I tried my best to be sure that the prisoner was guilty before I punished him. Then when I punished him, I forgot it, just like he was my own son. So they don't resent it, nor me. They've all spoke mighty high of me. They'd say, one thing about Mr. Dees, he'll punish you if you do something wrong, but he forgets it. He'll do you a favor if he can. I want to tell you about what happened to me one time. This is real funny. I was warden at a road camp. Same road camp I was warden at for 9 years and didn't get but 2 disciplinary reports. I went down to the county to get the prisoners out of the jail in Birmingham and to take them to the prison. We was renting them out to the county then and the highway department. Pause once again, right, to mention the contracted labor way back then all the way up to today. These companies, you know what I'm saying, have with the prisons and big business and other shit like that across. I saw an article this week or last week. It says some shit like prisoners deemed safe enough to work at McDonald's, but not for parole or some ish. SMH. So I went down and got this prisoner, and he was from the north. And them fellas there in the jail, they was waiting for me to come because they knew I was going to come with it. So he come out, and he had enough pencils to run the University of Alabama, writing paper, and a briefcase. He was really fixed up, dressed all up. I says, hey there, boy. He was a colored fella. I says, now where you're going, you ain't gonna need them pencils and all that paper and stuff. I says, the best thing for you to do is to send that stuff back home. He says, no, I might want to do a little writing, sir. And I says, well, that writing is liable to cause you a whole lot of trouble. He talked about it out of one side of his mouth. He was from Cleveland, Ohio, or somewhere up there. So I got him out to the prison. I decided that the best thing for me to do before he got in there and started some agitating and got my prisoners all messed up and everything, I had a good prison. Before he started a whole bunch of junk, be a penitentiary lawyer and all that, that's what we called him, penitentiary lawyer, see. So I told him, before I put you back there and let you ruin about half my prisoners, I suspect I better make a good South Alabama nagger out of you. So I took his briefcase, his pencils, all his writing materials. I got that strap out and I hit him with it twice. I let him know what it was, carried him to the back, put him in the cell. Well, I don't know what happened, but somebody told it in Montgomery that I got this boy's attention. So they sent and got him. Now, I want to pause again, right, to contradict the warden about the strap usage, what happened about all the protocol and shit he praised in the earlier, videos about how you had to notify Montgomery before you whooped ass, have doctors there, high up administration, etc. present to witness this, right? They do what they want, man. I must not have got all his pencils. So they take him down there to Montgomery and they made a trustee out of him. Put him to driving for one of the big wigs that went around and looked at all the road camps. I often think about this. He'd eat at my prison. He'd come there driving whoever was inspecting the prison at the time. I'd always fix him a good dinner and let him eat with the officers and all that sort of stuff. He'd always tell everyone what I had done to him. That goes to show you that they got respect for you if they get theirs. In other words, if they got respect for you, you have to make them respect you. If you put yourself in the same class as him and equal, he ain't got no respect for you. When he hadn't got any respect for you, he hadn't got anything. This prisoner was always respectful, and he's been to see me 2 or 3 times since he's been out. That same prisoner. Gators. Then you get a hold once in a while that's a gator. He can take 21 licks, and well, for instance, when I first went to work up there and they gave me a boy from Texas, they called him Texas. I went out there to load the sawdust, and he sat down and told me he wasn't going to work. So I sent in for the warden. The warden come out there and talked to him. Told him he'd have to go to work. He told him no, he wasn't going to work. So he carried him in there and gave him 21 licks. He was one of them kind, see? Gave him 21 licks. So he brought him back. He got right back up on that sawdust pile and sat down again. So I called the warden. Told him he wouldn't work. So he come and got him, took him back in there, and they called Montgomery. They gave him permission to give him 21 more, so they gave him 21 more. Well, he come back out there. Naturally, his ass had got pretty bad shape, and blood was running through his pants. He just crawled right back up in that same place, and he was going to show the rest of them prisoners that he could take as much as we could give. And excuse the expression, this is what he said to the prisoners. He said, I got more fanny than they got strapped. That was the second time. He got up there and sat down, and I sat back and got the warden to come back out there and tried to get him to go to work. He told him he wasn't going to go to work, so they carried him back in there. And when they brought him back to me, I don't think they hit him but 10 or 12 licks the last time. He told him he'd found out that they had way more strap than he had fanny, and he could go to work. They brought him back, and the blood had run down his pants to the bend of his knees, and he got his shovel and went to work. Well, he worked about an hour, and I knew the boy wasn't in no shape to work, so I called him and told him that he was sick. He needed to go to the hospital. So they come and got him, carried him to the hospital, and put him in the hospital until his fanny healed up a little bit. But that just shows you now, if they given in to that fella, he'd have undone everything that had been done up until then. They had to conquer him. If they was going to run a prison, they had to get his attention. Yes, sir. Now that boy happened to be out of my squad. Now I had another instance. I had a prisoner that was going free in the morning. His time was up, and he was also from Texas. A lot of them gators was from Texas. So I went out that morning and sat down. We were digging stumps. He sat down on a stump and told me, he says, I don't intend to work. Well, I sat and got the man. There wasn't anything for him to do but punish him. Didn't make no difference whether he was going free or not. If he hadn't punished him, then there the other one be before free, he would have sat down. That's what's wrong over there today. So this boy sat down. So he went in and they spanked him. Well, anybody that never had seen a prisoner spanked, after he's been spanked, a white man's buttocks turns blue. A nagger's buttocks turns white. And so went to Atmore, and he got down there in the Atmore. He just fell over in a ditch, and somebody come out and picked him up. They carried him down to the doctor's office right across from the drugstore. This fella come along and picked him up, and he asked him what's wrong, and he says, "I've been beat to death up there at the prison." So they carried the man down there and took him to the doctor. The doctor had never seen a man spanked before, so he dropped his breeches and it was black and blue. So he got the man out on the street and everybody came down there to look. They called him in there and showed him this fella, see? Well, they wrote it up in all the papers, advertisements, and everywhere else. There wasn't no television then. Radios made a big buggeroo out of it. It never did amount to nothing. Of course, it's just folks, like I told you a while ago. Folks having sympathy for a man about as mean as a fella could be. They had a whole lot of talk in Atmore and wanted to run the warden off and all that sort of stuff. But it finally got straightened out. Just like, well, somebody can grape a woman here in this neighborhood and everybody in the neighborhood wants to kill him right then. 6 months from now, you take that same prisoner over here at the prison and have to spank him. Everybody in this country will be in sympathy with that fella over there. So that goes back to what Art Linkletter says. People are funny. They done away with the strap and decided they would use some other method of discipline. They had gangs at Kilby just like they did over at Atmore that was running over the other prisoners. I knew who was in the gang. I had a prisoner from North Alabama, a little old country boy. His folks was poor. He come in the prison. I think he was in there for grand larceny or some little old amount of something. So he come in my office crying and they had took his money away from him. $3 was all his people had enough to send him. He hadn't had nothing to smoke, only what he begged. Told me to get his money back. I asked him who got his money and he told me he couldn't tell me. He was afraid they'd kill him. And I told him, I says, well, if they bother you, I'll be responsible for it. So he finally told me who it was, and I sent and got him. Brought him up there, and I asked him, I says, is them boys that took your money? And he said, yes, sir. So I told him, I says, I'll give y'all 15 minutes to go get this boy's money and bring it back. And this one went out the office door, and he turned his back to him and said, I'll get you, boy. So they was back in about 10 minutes, I reckon. I laid the money down on the corner of the desk and I asked the boy, was that his money? And he said, yes, sir. So I told him to take his money. I told him, I says, now, instead of you all hurting this boy, I'm going to make you all responsible for this boy. Whatever's done to this boy, I'm going to do twice as much to you. If you break one of this boy's arms, I'm going to break both of yours. If you punch out one of his eyes, I'm going to punch out both of yours. I said, just double whatever you do to him, I'm going to do to you. So I went up on the 5th floor, called all the prisoners out, and I had them all three standing beside me, and I told them all the same thing I had told these three that took his money. Well, they never did bother the boy, and from then on, I done away with that syndicate gang bunch that was in the prison. I done away with that shit. Helping prisoners. The prisoners found out that I would help them, back them up, or anything they needed in the prison. Just a few minutes knew it was in there. They come to, I find dope in the prison, in just a few minutes I knew it was there. They come tell me, they says, there's some dope in here and so-and-so's got it. If so-and-so's got it, tell me where it's at. Well, I'd go get it. Knives the same way. So when the knives got in there, I knew who had them. I'd take a box down there and put it in the cell and say, all right, I'm going to give y'all an hour to put all the knives in this box. All the knives you got in this block. And if I catch one on you after that, it's going to be you and me. Well, I kept the knives and all that store stuff out of it. I didn't have a prisoner unalive during the 9 years I was there. I don't think I had one stabbed either. And the prisoners, they could lay their stuff down, and the other prisoners wouldn't bother it. It all boils down to this point. Where you got discipline, you got control. That goes for homes, churches, towns, or whatever you want it to. If you hadn't got any discipline, you hadn't got anything. In your home, you can go down the street and find a home where there's children running that home. You haven't got no home. That's the same way what's wrong with these prisons today. They haven't got no discipline, and the prisoners are running the thing. That's just the lay of your troubles is right there. If a man deliberately goes out there and beats a man up, he needs punishing for it. But if a prisoner violates the rules and you write up the rules for him to abide by and he violates them, you hadn't punished the prisoner. The prisoner has punished himself. You see, in other words, you wrote the rules up and gave it to him. Then if he violates it, he's the one that's done the punishing. The man that punishes the man is not the one guilty man. The guilty man is the man that committed the crime. So there's where the federal government, I think, has missed the boat. Because the judge, he runs the court. He sentences who he wants to. He gives him as much time as he wants to. He don't ask the prison system nothing about it. So naturally, a man that runs a prison has got a job to do. I think you ought to make a report to the federal government what he does, and to put a report in that office at the Capitol and all that sort of stuff. But as far as controlling the prisoners, the man that is the head of that thing has to have control. If he can't control it, then he ain't got no business being there. If a judge can't control his court, he ain't got any business in that court. When they did away with the strap, they burned them all. I had mine until somebody stole it. I had it in a sack and somebody stole it. I don't know where it went. I had a special strap made when I was at Katona, and I punished my prisoners. Put them right back on the same job they was on. If they was trustees, I put them right back on as trustees. I didn't write a damn thing up on the report. They went on to get parole when the time come. They went free. I never did take anybody's good time. The prisoners like that. In other words, they like for you to correct them and let it be between you and them. And that's the way I handled it. Just like it was the family of my own, and I didn't have no trouble. Just like I say, I asked for 2 disciplinary reports during the whole 9 years I was there. I never did have to use the strap very much. At one time, I had as many women as I had men at Katona. But you got to treat the women just like you do the men. They're all men in the warden's eyes, so I treated them all just alike. I told my prisoners, my men prisoners, I told them, I says, now these is my women, and if I catch you riding in one of them or trying to talk to one of them, it's gonna be me and you. I never did have no trouble with them. Had them all in the same building. Women on one end, men on the other. And they wasn't always black, no sir. There was as many whites that would give trouble according to the prison population as the colored. The hard-headed man, the hardest man to control, is a white man. Interesting. Wonder why. Probably because, oh wait, don't worry about it. Don't worry. I can't say. Generally, I got along with the colored. I have never showed any partiality in the colored or the whites or the women. I'd go far as back as the women when I had the women. They was all prisoners, and I had some rules and regulations to go by. If a prisoner broke them, whether he be white or colored, he got the same treatment. If a woman broke them, she got the same treatment. Now, generally, I had 2 or 3 young nagger girls, and I have some young colored boys that would do some little old frivolous thing. It wasn't much, but he needed a little punishment. I really caught him up under my arm and spanked his fanny with my hand and put him down, and that would straighten it out. So I would never have to do nothing else to him. I think he's talking about juveniles here, right? You can't have the same rules and regulations, and you can't treat every prisoner alike, because there's no 2 humans alike, and you're dealing with human nature. So you've got to handle every problem with whatever it takes to handle it. There's no way to draw a line, say I'm going to do this. You're just as crazy as you can be. You can put a road down yonder, and you're first on this side, then you're on that side. Sometimes you're in the middle. You may come out the same spot down yonder, but you can't go straight. You've got to give, and you've got to take. Later, the doghouse took the place of the strap, as I said, but I generally had a little extra on the side I used to. But right on the other hand, before I got Kilby straight, in other words, Kilby in just about as bad a shape as that boy, when I went there, they had done away with the strap. Naturally, I had to use everything I could to hold my discipline up. Don't let my discipline go down, because if I know that, I was gone. Well, they told me to use solitary confinement for the doghouse, but I went over on the river and I got me some big white rocks, looked like about as big as a hen egg, poured me about a ½ inch of concrete in it, laid them rocks in there, and when he laid down in there, he'd naturally have a lump under him. He couldn't be comfortable. Well, that got the job done until somebody told the governor what I had done, and he'd made me get rid of it. But while I had that in, now to show how smart one of them is, he get one of them a blanket all to sleep on, wrap up in. I had a little boy in there. He had a bar in there. I had a prisoner that was bad to run away and had to handcuff him at night and sit in a guard with him during the day. For me, he had a piece of bar about waist high where he could stand up with his hands handcuffed to the bar, or he could lay down. We got a picture here, right? Cutaway view of the interior of a typical doghouse, right? They say usually 6 by 9 feet, showing the handcuff bar, right? That bar went clean in the floor where he could lay down, and it come out of the wall, set off about 6 inches from the wall. Well, I had a prisoner that I put in there on this rough floor, and he made him a hammock out of the top of that thing, and he was wadded up in that hammock asleep, sleeping as good there as I was sleeping at home, so I had to take his blanket away from him. That's the reason I say you can't treat no 2 alike. Every situation is different. I carried a stick at Kilby all the time. A prisoner made it for me out of hickory. I never did use it, only when a prisoner acted like he wanted to not do what I wanted him to do. Then I'd hang it around his neck. I hit him wherever I could hit him, anywhere there's anything sticking up. I didn't pick out no certain place to hit him. If I took a notion to hit him, I hit. I tell you what I done one night. We had prisoners that run all the guards out of the block at Kilby, and they had called me to come up there, and they was fighting in the cell. When I come in the front door, I went through the office and picked up a billet that I had. Fred's got it now. A billet is a wooden billy club made out of hickory. Then I went in there, I told them to open the block. There's about 400 prisoners in there. I told them to open the cell, and they was all down in the back of the block. There were 2 men fighting, and everybody else was ganged up around them. And one of the prisoners, this white prisoner, one of them turned around and seen me coming and said, "Yonder comes Captain Dees, and he'll hit the first man he gets reach of." He hollered that out. And when I got to where the prisoners was fighting, there wasn't anybody but just them 2 there. They'd all done scattered, run up the stairways, and got out the way. I reached down, got a hold to them, and said, "You boys cut out that fighting." So they quit, just like that. Well, they had done run the guards out of there, and I went in there right by myself. They knew I would pop one of them. One night, I was right over here at Atmore, and I was deputy warden, and I was at Atmore, and they called and told me they was out in the hallway, and they wouldn't go in their cells. So I went up there. They was out in front of the prison with shotguns and everything else, and I drove up there and said, "What's the matter?" They says, "The prisoners back yonder won't go in their cells." The guards had all done come up front, so I said, "Open them doors." They opened the doors and gave me a good stick. I had the stick Fred's got. That's the one I carried for about 15, 18 years. So they opened up the last door, and I went in there, and I said, "You boys get in them cells." They just went to going in them cells just like that. I didn't have to hit one prisoner. Not one prisoner, but they knew I would. That's the reason I said a while ago, if they know you're going to do something, they're not going to run it. But if they know they're going to get away with it, then they'll do it. That's human nature. Another time, after I went on the jail inspector's job and they had took me out of Kilby and made a man deputy warden that lived right next door to me, they called him and told him they had locked up the guards and some of the prisoners had went out front. They didn't know how many. Damn. Niggas done escaped. They didn't know how many, and it took the guards' uniforms and wore them out the prison. So he called me and asked me would I go up there with him, and I told him I'd go up there. I didn't know at the time the convicts had took all the guards and locked them in cold storage. And I got up there with him. He was shaking like he had a chill on him, and I says, "You ain't got no business going in there in the shape you're in. You just stay here and I'll go in." So he stayed out on the front, and I went on into Kilby and went on back through there. It was just as quiet as you couldn't hear nothing, like a ghost town. So I went on back in the kitchen. I knew there's a bunch of prisoners in there supposed to be fixing breakfast, see? We kept prisoners up all night because we run shifts in the cotton mill around the clock. So I went on back in the kitchen. I couldn't hear or see a prisoner. I couldn't hear one or nothing. Then, directly, I heard a door rattle on the cold storage now. And I went there and took a meat cleaver and knocked the lock off of it. There were 6 guards in there with them billet clubs, and all the prisoners that worked down there, all locked up in that cold storage. I turned all of them out, went on back up to the front, and the director and others had come in the front, up there behind there, and got down there where the prisoners was out in the front. I walked up there and says, "I got the guards out of the freezer, and I turned all the cooks out. I don't know how many of them are gone. I don't know who's gone." Another says, "I just don't know how we'll find out." I said, "Well, I'll find out for you." So I went. They had done put it on the radio that they had escaped. Didn't know who, but be on the lookout for a carload of what looked like guards, but they were prisoners. And I went back there to the first white cell block. The first cell on the right, there was a cook that worked out there in the front and cooked for the guards. His name was Curtis. "Curtis," I said, "who's it that's gone?" He said, "Oh, heck, old Sam Hamilton." And I think he called 3 or 4 more. Says they took Mr. Williams with a little old pistol a while ago and left out of here with him and them guards. He named off them other prisoners, so I went up there and told the director who all was gone. About that time, they caught them not too far and brought them back. Put them on the dog wagon and put me behind them. Sent me to Atmore with them. I locked them up. When I got back, I had a letter telling me it didn't make no difference if the prison was burning to the ground for me not to go back inside of a prison. Then they made the remark that I wasn't going to go back to work in prison no more because I retired and made a trade to be a jail inspector. So I didn't go back, and I ain't been back in there since. Kilby, was the main prison. That was where the electric chair was, and that's where all the maximum security men was, and that was the easiest prison in the state to run. I run road camps, and I run Atmore and help run them all, but Kilby was the best prison to handle your prisoners. There wasn't no way for them to get out hardly, and you could have different types of things you could use to discipline them in there that would offset the strap or whatever they would use for discipline. I enjoyed working at Kilby the 9 years I was there. They was the easiest 9 years that I ever worked to handle prisoners, and I had around 12 to 1,400 prisoners all the time. We had a huge church, hospitals, TB hospital, and regular hospital. Kilby was huge. We had a cotton mill inside the wall. We had a tag plant inside the wall. We could work all 4 prisoners in the cotton mill and all the medium custody men. The men that didn't have too bad of a record, we could check them out on the farm. We raised all of our stuff there on the farm to eat. And so they done away with that prison and bought this one down here, and they've been having trouble with it ever since. Kilby had death row. A man sentenced to the chair, he went to death row. He stayed there until they commuted his sentence or electrocuted him. I went up there every day and talked to him. I asked him how they was getting along and all that sort of stuff, which I went all over the whole prison every day. That's something I don't reckon any other deputy warden has ever done. Fred D. Sr. comment, y'all remember, this is his son. Death row was a separate wing, and it was called Little Alcatraz, mostly by the inmates, but the guards referred to it as that too. The convicts gave the name of Little Alcatraz because Alcatraz, from what I can read and everything, has had a reputation of being pretty tough. Went all over the cell block, up on the 5th floor and all around, right by myself, inspecting the prison, the beds, the cotton mill, tag plant. I made the round every single day and visited the whole operation, went over the farm. In other words, I seen the whole building. The electric chair. They had other men seeing after the jobs, but I go by and see if there's anything they needed me for. They had the electric chair as far back as I can remember, and they electrocuted them. 2, 8, 9, 10 a year. Damn. See, they used to be up 10 hats. You know what I'm saying? Back then, we only up 6 this year, right? When they went up there, they was electrocuted. During the 50s and 60s, there were anywhere from 4 to 10 to 12 inmates on death row. I say they kept them work down pretty close. Of course, you see, when they give a man a death sentence, he automatically gets an appeal. Automatically, it goes to the Alabama Supreme Court. Well, if they can find anything wrong in that trial, then they give them another trial. So whenever the Supreme Court rules on it, they don't find nothing wrong, everything is on order, then they electrocuted the man. Naturally, this didn't build up a surplus. Now, he also got a hearing before the governor. The day before he was to be electrocuted, like I said, he was going to be electrocuted tonight at midnight, which this is a Friday. They carried him to the governor today. We carried them down before the governor. Their lawyer was there. The solicitor was there that sentenced them. Their lawyer would make a plea for a life sentence, and then the solicitor would get up and tell the governor about how the trial was and all that was the man's guilty of and all that sort of stuff. Then the governor would decide whether to commute his sentence to life or let him be electrocuted. It was in the governor's office. Right in front of the governor is where it happened, and the governor talked to the death row inmate himself. Then they had all the court records there. You know, generally it took about half a day. I'd say 2 hours or something like that. He was generally down at the governor's office 2 hours. Sometimes the governor wouldn't give you a definite answer on that sort of thing until 11 o'clock at night. He'd call you and say, well, I'm going to let the law take its course, or I'm going to commute that man's sentence to life in prison. Or he could postpone it for a month. Now, I want to pause right here to denote this process, man. They definitely should bring that back and let the governor at least look these men and women in their eyes before they engaged in the systematic taking of life, you know what I'm saying, from the government and these man-made laws, man, instead of just, you know, looking at their name and crime on a sheet of paper and, you know, flipping a coin or whatever the hell these bitches be doing. Sometimes you wouldn't know he was going to do until maybe 5 minutes before you was getting ready to electrocute a man. Sometimes you done shaved his head, got him prepared to electrocute him, and the governor would call and say, well, I've commuted this man's sentence to life. So then you turn him into population the next morning. When they was electrocuting people, I would say for the electrocution offense, there's about 1 in 5 that got a life sentence. Of course, I don't believe in leaving it. If 12 men gives a man the electric chair and they heard the evidence and give him the electric chair, then I don't think the governor ought to have the right over them 12 men to say that he'll give him life in prison, because it could be political with the governor. True. A governor could be satisfying a bunch of politicians, and them 12 men done said he was guilty and they done sentenced him to the chair. I think that's enough right there. If anybody commutes his sentence to life, it ought to be them 12 men. Sometimes he'd stay on death row 4 or 5 years. He could appeal it, be sentenced to the chair, and they take an appeal, and they take him back and try him 2, maybe 3 times, give him the chair every single time they tried him, but he'd go back in there. Well, you couldn't electrocute him until the Supreme Court reviewed the case and seen everything was in order like it ought to be. If there was any flaw in it all or any doubt in the conviction, the prisoner got the benefit of the doubt. Same way with my handling of discipline. If I had any doubt whether a prisoner was guilty or not, then I'd give the prisoner the benefit of the doubt. They'd electrocute high as 6, 7, 8, maybe 10 a year. It all depended on how many crimes was committed that carried the electric chair. Sometimes there was but maybe 1 or 2 sent to the electric chair all over the state in a year. Well, naturally, there wouldn't be but 1 or 2 electrocuted in a year. It all depended on the men that committed the crimes that'd be electrocuted. The date was set for them to be electrocuted, and they electrocuted him 1 minute after midnight on Friday night. Now, for why I don't know, but they electrocuted every prisoner on Friday morning right after midnight. For what reason I don't know, that was the procedure. It was done right at 1 minute after midnight. I pulled the switch myself. Well, the only way that I got assigned to it was because the warden had heart trouble. The law reads that if the warden's sick, the deputy warden at the warden's prison got to do it at Kilby. That is, then if a deputy was sick, then the director had to appoint a man to pull the switch. You couldn't just pick up Tom, Dick, and Harry and go in there and kill a man. Shit, that's what they doing now. They can't even get the right nurses and shit in there. They can't even find veins and shit. I'd done it for 4 years. I worked under the warden. He had trouble with his heart. I'd done it all 4 years. Of course, the warden was always standing right there beside me. Nobody in the audience knew whether or not he pulled the switch, but it was me. I pulled it. We was in separate rooms. Nobody in there but me and him. There's a hole about 4 inches in diameter, and they would have a little paddle there that said ready on one side and stop on the other. So when they got the prisoner ready to be electrocuted and everything, and the doctor had talked to him, the preacher, and he said everything he had to say, they put the little ready sign up there, then snap, you'd pull the switch. He'd never know what hit him. He could order anything he wanted to eat the night he was going to be electrocuted. He could order anything in the world. As much of it as he wanted, it was brought to him. Steak, chicken, anything. Anything he wanted to eat, they give it to him. The family could visit him the day before. They could stay in there and visit him as long as they wanted to. The families hardly ever came to witness. I don't remember overseeing any prisoner's family there when they were executed. Now, they could claim the body and the state could ship it to wherever they was from, they ship it back. But generally, like a prisoner killed your wife or killed your brother or your father or something like that, and the man was sentenced, the chair generally, them's the people that would come and see that it was done. They always brought a man to the electric chamber, fastened him to the chair, and they asked him if he had anything to say. Did he realize what was fixing to happen? And he'd say, yeah. And you'd ask him if he had anything to say, and the preacher would talk to him, pray with him, or whatever he wanted to do. There was always a preacher there, a doctor, the warden, the deputy warden, the electrician, and the press, and his family if they wanted to be. Or if he killed one of your brothers and you wanted to witness the electrocution, they let you be in there too. But they had you fenced. They had all the press and all the visitors fenced off away from the chair. They could see the chair, but they couldn't get to the chair because it was open. But they had a fence up there because, in other words, it was dangerous. Because the chair sit on a rubber mat, see, and the whole lot of times when a man is electrocuted, he would piss himself. And that piss would run down on the mat and off. And if you was to happen to get contact with it, you would get electrocuted too while that juice was on. You pulled the switch. It was 2,100 volts or 20,000 volts, something I can't remember. Anyhow, it hit him all at once and that'd kill him. He never did know what hit him. Then it would cut itself off. Then it could build itself back up, 2,100 volts again. It would cut itself back on. Then it would cut itself off. But during the time that you pulled the switch and it built itself back up and cut itself off, man didn't have no control over him. It was an automatic deal. That gave him the juice twice. I've seen them that when that wouldn't kill him and the doctor would examine him, he would say, this man is not dying. He's coming back too. So the doctor would then order another shot. So then you'd have to give him another shot. Well, that's the shot that generally would finish him. There's a smoke that would burn him a little bit, burn him where he got the leg irons at and the top of his head. It would burn him and cause an odor in that smoke, you see, like you burnt flesh or something like that. And it'd get in your clothes and you couldn't get it out. Well, I got it. The first man that I electrocuted, I got it in my clothes. In that suit of clothes. You always had to have on a suit of clothes. Well, I went to the cleaners and they couldn't get it out. So I just used it strictly for electrocutions from then on. I want to tell the press about all that. I have seen them when they had electrocuted a man, they just faint. They'd fall out just like folks you shoot with a .22 rifle. Just fall out, faint. Folks faint. You'd be surprised at people that just can't stand nothing hardly. They'd faint. Then, like I was saying before, somebody grape a woman over here. Well, everybody in this country wants to kill him. When that happens, right then they want to kill him. Well, alright, you catch him after you send him to the electric chair and electrocute him. He gets up there and kills some other prisoner or does something real bad and you have to correct him. These same folks that wanted to kill him when he committed this crime will have sympathy for him. So you can't tell about human nature. People are funny. Yes, they're funny. You know, I've seen them walk in there, sit down in the electric chair and never flinch. Not a word. The warden would ask him, say, well, you got anything to say? And he'd say, not a thing. I'm as guilty as I can be. Says, I committed the crime, I'm guilty of it, and I'm due the punishment. Well, that's the same way they feel about discipline. That's the reason I say you can't run a prison or nothing else without discipline. Any prisoner that's over there at the prison today knows you can't run a prison without discipline because you've got to have discipline to take care of them. That way they won't run over them others and that wants to do right. So they want a warden that's a strict, disciplined man. They want a warden that he tells one of them he'll do it. They want a warden that won't let them toughs, that's what they call them, run over the other prisoners. And that's what the United States Supreme Court is saying now. You can't do this, you can't do that. Well, I can't see how they going to run a prison without some kind of punishment that a man dreads. If you ain't got punishment that a man dreads or he respects you, you haven't got no punishment. The only two women that's ever been electrocuted during that time and I worked at the state, well, the only two that's ever been electrocuted in the state of Alabama was electrocuted at Kilby while I was deputy warden. One of them was electrocuted for killing her nieces and nephews, poisoning them and collecting the insurance money. The other was in there for killing her husband. Of course, women, them two women that was killed, a woman's head, when you shave it, is about as, I don't know, in other words, a woman with her head shaved is about as an ugly thing you ever looked at. Because her head is not made like a man's. Did you know that? It's not shaped like a man's. It don't look like a man's. There's all the difference in the world in the shape of a woman's head and a man's head. And electrocuting women bothered me worse than electrocuting men. Of course, I looked at it from the standpoint like that woman that killed all them children and collected that insurance, that she killed them kids so she wasn't no better off, was no better than they was. She was the first one. She just walked in there, sat down in the chair, just like she didn't pay it no more attention than nothing in the world. Sat down in the chair and the doctor examined her and the warden asked her, you realize what's fixing to happen? She says, yeah. And the church preacher says, you got anything to say now? She says, I just hope the people over here in Elmore County are satisfied. That's all she said. She was just as sarcastic as she could be. She was white. Both of them were white. She was dressed in a prison uniform. Yeah, they had white dresses or blue dresses over there at the women's prison. She was in prison clothes. They brought her from Wetumpka over here to Kilby and put her in the death row for 48 hours before she was electrocuted. There was a matron staying in there with her all that time. I think it was the deputy warden that stayed in there that whole time she was at Kilby. They went to the electric chair with her. Otherwise, there was just the preacher, press, stuff like that was in there. The warden signed the death certificate. The doctor made it out. The warden signed it. The doctor had to sign it too, you know. I went to Kilby to work in 51. I believe it was 50 or 51, and I worked there until I come back to Atmore in 61. I reckon somewhere along there I was at Kilby about 9-10 years. I couldn't say whether it was the first year I was there. I know the first man that I electrocuted killed and graped. He killed a little baby and graped the little baby's mother up there at Calera in Shelby County, and I know that. That's the first one I ever electrocuted. And I think that I got a piece in my purse that he put in the paper. He told the press that night how nice I'd been to the people that was in death row, and he hoped that I continue to be that way. I believe I've got a piece in my purse. I know I clipped it out. It's in my purse for a long time. I think I still got it. I talk to the minister near about every day. Not about the prisoners, but I talk to the minister like, say, he was in and out of the prison every day, and the doctors too. I talk to all them folks every day. Well, I tell you that's one thing that really worried me a whole lot. because the Bible says, thou shalt not kill. Of course, it goes on and says in the Bible, some was killed during Christ's time, that he put some to death. But the way I looked at it, the 12 men that sentenced him to the chair was the 12 men that killed him. I just carried out my duties. I just fulfilled my duties. That has been on my mind more than anything, is that switch. But on the other hand, somebody's got to do it. And when I took the job as deputy warden at Kilby, I knew what came along with it. Shit. I hope you're a motherfucking maker. I hope that's good enough for the good Lord you believe, man, when you made it to heaven, bro. The state, 21 years before I ever saw the electric chair I worked for them. I never saw the electric chair until I went to work at Kilby as deputy warden. And there y'all have it, man. Let me know what y'all think about this in the comments section, man. The warden's hard on for discipline continues, man. As y'all can see, according to him, prisoners liked and thanked him for whooping their ass when they fucked up. And running that electric chair or any form of execution has to mess with somebody's mental, man, because however you look at it, hey, you engaged in the systematic taking of life implemented by man-made governments, man. Most gods frown on that, I'm pretty damn sure, man. But yeah, man, happy new year to y'all, and let me know what y'all think about this in the comment section. Like, sub, share, donate to the channel, mess with the sponsor, DC the Voice, Alabama Prisoner Profiles.